wish everybody a Merry Christmas. Remind them that Friday morning, 6:30 to 9, having the employee breakfast.
Friday morning.
Bright and early. Catered by, cover that up. Catered by the Cracker Barrel.
In Franklin.
In Franklin. The Franklin. Well, both Cracker Barrels are in Franklin.
And the Alderman serving?
It is? Oh, well, don't go to that one. The one off by the interstate in Franklin. And it was the first one.
The original.
No, the one in Cool Springs is not by the interstate. It's right off Mallory Lane, by the mall, in Brentwood.
It's planned that way.
Are you? Really?
I think that's right.
I thought Costco was like the dividing line.
Well, I mean, I don't know where, I mean, I pull it up.
No, but
I mean, you come down Mallory.
That's right. That
Next to Captain D's.
All right, I'm sure this is interesting for everybody.
Viewers at home.
Viewers at home are glad to know that. All right. Item number 2 is, and just for everybody's knowledge, this will be the last work session and BOMA meeting this month. For the year. We're not going to have our second one. So the next official BOMA meeting and work session is January 11th, if I'm not correct. So just wanted everybody to be aware of that. And hope everybody here and in our wonderful viewing audience has a safe and Merry Christmas, holiday season, and come back safely. So, all right, enough of that stuff. Mushy stuff. And we need to hurry tonight because my baby is home from college. And I have to go see her. So, item number 2 is comments from citizens on some issue that's not on, any issue that's not on the agenda. If you want to discuss something that's on the agenda item, please wait till that item comes up and make yourself known. We'll call on you. And if nobody else wants to say anything, we'll move on to item number 3. You'll notice there's several issues that we're going to hear again tonight, and that's just because we're not having another meeting in December. A couple things we'd wanted to get taken care of before the year is out. So, item number 3 is consideration of proposed ordinance 2010-76, an ordinance to establish the special assessments for the sanitary sewer improvements in the Boyd Mill Avenue area, establishing a public hearing for January the 11th. And Eric and Eric are here.
That's right. We've got 2 of the special assessments or sanitary sewer assessments that we're bringing forward. Item 3 is the Boyd Mill Avenue area project, and this has an amount that we are spreading in the property assessment category of $85,954.44. This is net of the 40% loan forgiveness that is granted through the state revolving loan fund that we were able to receive, which is augmented by federal recovery dollars. So this is the number that is being spread among those property owners. You will remember at our last meeting, we did have a citizen contact us regarding a change in their assessment. And also, I think some of you, I know I received a letter also between the meetings about this same issue. Mrs. Bennett has contacted us with concern about how her assessment had changed, and essentially this relates to cell towers that are on the property. And we've re-examined that issue, looked at that issue, and really feel that it's appropriate to include that. It's attached to the property, it's part of the property. And feel that that's appropriate for that calculation. The only exception or exclusion that we were providing throughout the assessment was that of personal property. Do not feel that this meets that definition. Of course, this property would, if those towers are removed or the trailer is removed that's there, that would change the relative value of that property compared to the other owners, and so that assessment would change based on that if those were ever removed. But given what's there now, we feel it's appropriate to include that in the calculation. I don't know if Mrs. Bennett is here. I talked to her earlier in the week.
She is not.
I thought she might be here. On her behalf, I'll at least say, she feels that those don't receive sewer service. They should not be assessed in that way. That's a difficult argument from the staff standpoint in that, if we have to assess everything that's attached to the property on the property and feel that that's the fair way to approach it. Otherwise, do we start netting out a detached garage or some other element of property that's in place? So she had expressed that concern. I wanted to at least share that with you. I'd had a conversation with her a couple days ago and wanted to share that with you. I indicated to her what I was going to say, which is that staff feels that is the appropriate calculation. We regret that it was not caught when we did the initial estimates a year ago. It's a very confusing situation in that there are these multiple special interests and there are multiple bills produced for one single property. I believe that's going to be corrected on the county side going forward, but right now that's what we're dealing with. And so that's probably why we ended up where we were in terms of that not getting calculated in spreading the assessment a year ago when we provided the estimates. Be glad to take any questions you have. I know there are some other residents from Boyd Mill here. Be glad to answer any questions they may have. And again, this would be on for first reading tonight. And right now we're talking about having second reading and a public hearing at the January 11th meeting. So let's take any questions.
If someone's coming up, while they're coming up,
you want to...
Margaret Ford property also, I thought we excluded that at one time, and we've got it back in. She lives at the top of the hill, like it's 1,200 feet down to the road. But in going back looking at that, it looks like we did not. But I know we discussed that, and I guess maybe I just discussed it and thought we left it out or excluded it. Okay. But she is included in that. So, and I don't see Margaret or Robert, either one, here tonight either. So they're not here.
They were here last
But they were here. They were here last time.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the last name?
Ford.
Margaret.
Her sister's
Margaret and Robert Ford.
Robert Ford.
And her sister's one that got up and talked.
Y'all have... Come on. You want to come up or...
Well, we need to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I could repeat it, but
Come on up.
come on up and you got to state your name for the record.
Lucille Rosenthal.
Okay. Hi, Lucille. How are you?
If we pay our assessment in full in January or February, I would like to request that a letter be sent to each person that does so, stating, you are free and clear, and we will never ask you for any more money concerning the sewer.
Oh, I'm glad you said that.
And I would like it signed by you, Mr. Stuckey, and by the mayor and anybody else. Eric?
We'll be glad. We'll be glad.
As it relates to the sanitary sewer assessment, and you've paid in full, we can
We'd
provide
be
you.
honored to sign that letter.
Thank you. I don't want to ever have to discuss this topic again.
The feeling's pretty mutual. Anything else? Any questions? Yeah.
Yes, I also talked to Ms. Bennett, and I understand that by contract, the owners of the cell tower pay the property assessment there. So I think that, does make it, I can see why the county did have it in separate, on separate bills. And as I say, I understand by contract, they are required to pay the
Yeah, but
assessment.
they wouldn't, it's still on her property, and it's still owned by her. And it's not, a lot of times it's like a net lease. And so in a lot of businesses, you own a property, but it's a net lease where the tenant pays everything. They pay the taxes, insurance, and everything else. So that's what those leases are. They're net type leases. So that now, and the issue is this is not a tax. It's not a property tax, and I think that's probably where her issue is.
No, but we're using the property tax assessment as a part of our calculations.
Right. And part of the reason why it's assessed differently is it came later on, would be my guess, and it's just, and I own several properties that are assessed differently because of the timing of it, for whatever reason. I have one property I get 3 different tax bills on, so that's not unusual, but they're all real estate taxes. And this is not a personal property tax. I don't believe it's a real estate tax.
The other aspect of that is, I mean, I don't know that cell towers ever go away, but I guess they do get changed from one location to another. So in that case, then...
She'd be reassessed and it'd go away.
If it was removed from that property, the next time it was assessed, the next year, it would be, that would be
Because it really is,
removed.
it is the structure.
Yeah. And she, it's on her property, so she, because she didn't actually own the structure, but she owns the property.
She still owns the property.
That the structure's on.
Yeah.
And she gets income off of it, too, so. All right. Anything else on that? There was a gentleman that I moved so quickly during public input that I didn't give him a chance to talk. So if you all want to, is there 1 or 2 or 1? So we'll go back to number 2. Come up here and sit, if you would. Sorry, sometimes I move quicker than...
My name is Noel Jones. I'm a general contractor trying to pull a permit for renovation to an existing structure at 1664 Mallory Lane, which is in Brentwood city limits. This is Patrick Terry representing Auto Body America, the tenants of that structure once it's renovated. We were late in getting the application for sewer availability in for this particular meeting by a few days, and I feel like we're holding up a pretty big train for a gnat in the track, so to speak, and wanted to ask the board if they would be willing to vote on that this evening so that we could proceed with the permitting process through the city of Brentwood for their renovation and grade work. That is our request. Eric Gardner has reviewed everything that we've submitted and says had it been in the city limits, this sewer availability letter would have been done already. So,
Is it outside urban growth boundary?
It's in Brentwood, so yes, it is. It's north of Moore's Line, off of Mallory.
across from Stewart Lumber.
Brentwood
Yeah.
won't provide services. It flows into.
It flows into our
There's
service area.
There's other properties.
So it's like near the Sonic?
No.
Across from Stewart Lumber
Oh, on Hillsborough, on
Mallory.
Mallory.
on that.
I'm sorry.
North of Moore's.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got my direction. Sure. Yeah. So we flow about from the top of that, from the flag property. Do we have part of the flag property then it flows down? Or it flows the other direction? It doesn't
I
matter.
think part of it.
Okay. At least I know where we are. Well, do we provide service for other properties that are there? Okay.
Basically, as he said, the only thing that kept it from me approving it already was the fact that it's outside city limits and it goes before the board.
We really
And you also
can't put it on it. We really can't put it on our agenda tonight. I mean,
And what kind of time limit did you say? What are you working with?
The crux of the matter is we've really tried to go through the planning boards and everything and do everything that properly as we could. Obviously, when I went to pull the permits for the sewer and pay the tap fees and everything, they said, oh, by the way, I have a large construction team that's standing by. I have a lot of cost. 30 days actually does cost me rather significant. So if I could pray for the board to take a moment of your time and consider what would normally be a very quick process, I would be forever indebted.
and I think that's wonderful, but I think legally we just can't do that. I mean, we have to do notification of anything that we're doing, and we can't do it.
See, this isn't on your agenda. The exception would be an emergency.
Yeah.
And that has to be an emergency for the city, not for
Yeah.
this individual. That's what's challenging for us, because I talked to our city attorney about this very issue, because we're trying to think of, is there some way we can deal with it in terms of an agenda item? I just don't know that there is.
So what was their alternative now? So
We could do a special call meeting if you all were so inclined to do
In
that.
order to do that, and in order
Need to
to
post it.
vote on it tonight, you have to have 100% vote, and we're missing a member. And that's really it.
At the moment,
Yeah.
to do an emergency vote.
Because the point is, not only does the public need to have notice that there's an item to be
Right.
considered, but all of you do too.
Now-
If someone's absent, they don't know that there's an agenda.
Right.
Let me make one suggestion. We have a Budget and Finance Committee meeting on Thursday at 5 o'clock. Could we have a special call meeting at 4:45 or at 5:30 or something like that, that we'll have a majority of the board here? Can that,
You can do that, but you would have to make the decision whether or not it's an emergency, because you're not going to have time to get it in the paper
This is
for
holiday
notification.
season. Christmas.
But on,
You can do a pretty fast little ad.
well, you got, what's our notification period?
Reasonable. It's just-
I mean, we've done emergency meetings where we've done bid awards and that kind of thing.
Anybody
I have no objections to
Anybody got
that.
an objection to that?
No, and
All
I
right,
think
let's do that.
considering the cost that would, in this economy right now, burdening our people in our community, I would like to see us do everything we can to help in this economy. So if we can do that on Thursday.
With one caveat coming from me, that everything jives, and that, the service is available, and that it's consistent with our, how we do service in that area, and all that stuff. So we'll ask you to make sure that's the case. But we got a 5 o'clock meeting, we'll do it at 4:50.
Could we do it after?
Oh, sure.
Our meeting is kind of short, and I'm giving an exam that after. What'd you say? I'm giving an exam that after.
he's playing Santa Claus.
All right, so we'll do it at 5:30. Well, I tell you what, are you planning on being there at 5?
I'll be there at 5.
We'll do it at 5, and we'll have
And
finance
everyone-
right after that.
That's good.
How's that?
Thank you.
Okay?
Yes.
And we'll provide notice on the website. We'll post it here at City Hall. We'll give notice right now on Franklin TV that we're going to meet Thursday at 5 o'clock as a special call meeting to consider this sewer availability request.
All right?
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I don't say government doesn't work fast.
Well,
All
this
right.
is kind of an unusual situation where we
Don't have
serve the
another-
sewer
that-
for the other
Well,
people,
that's
the
right.
neighbors.
Yeah.
John,
It's not unusual.
We do have, well, you can do the next, they can come up on the next agenda item, it's on,
Well, you come on up.
yeah. No, it's not country, it's country road, come on.
Oh, there's his country road?
No, there's his board member.
And that's his country, that's what I thought.
Okay, Ms. Ford.
Miss Ford, sit over there.
Okay.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are y'all?
We're great.
We're fine. We're glad to see you today. I'm glad to be here, honey.
How may we be of assistance?
We can be of assistance by excluding us from the sewage, because we live so far up on the mountain that it'd be impossible for us to get sewage up there.
I know you said mountain, not hill.
Well, it is a mountain when you start off in the ice.
We're going to have a ski lift over there in a little bit. We'll
That's
have
right.
winter
We need
skiing.
one, but you have to prepare it.
I don't know.
You just want to check into it?
I don't know what to tell you. This was included in our list, is that?
Yep.
Was it, and it was included last year when we did the estimate
Yes.
as well? Okay.
It was.
And we've apparently provided a tap to this property, so that's what we need to look at, where we are with that. But when we built the project, we provided
A tap.
a tap to that location. So that's
We don't have an answer.
where we are.
Well, the tap is there available for her if she chose to use it. But no one has to tap on it,
But they pay that.
whether they do it or not. Mhm.
You don't have to tap on, but you have to pay the minimum bill.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
no, you have to pay the assessment.
You have to pay the assessment.
That's what the big thing is.
And the minimum bill.
Yeah.
Ms. Ford, how many acres is your property?
First time it's 6.9.
At the top of the mountain.
Yes, very top, right around the circle.
Does your property come all the way to the road?
Yes, it does. I gave my sister an acre and a half, and then the other, it was 9 acres to start with.
Is your sister closer to the road?
Yes.
Her acre?
Yes.
Will she connect?
She will
She
have
would already,
to,
she's
yeah.
already.
She's
So
going to.
part of your acreage is connected, will connect. The ones you gave to her, the acres?
Yes,
He's on the hilltop too, and that's.
So that's kind of the
At one time, there was discussion because
it's
Margaret
number
lived
14.
as far away as she lived. I do remember being left out, and again, like I said, whether we include it, if we include it, that we include it.
Well, can I play just devil's advocate for a minute? Don't take any offense to this, but
And register to vote.
yeah, that's right. That's exactly
Ready to
right.
vote.
In case you do take offense, and that way you can have an opportunity to express your dissatisfaction. You know, the issue is not with you, but the issue might be with those that come after you. And so that if you were to sell your house at some point in time and the assessment had been paid for, then your property would have sewer availability and would have the value of sewer availability without you having to have paid for it, and your neighbors would have paid for it. And so, you know, it becomes a dilemma for us because of that very reason, because your neighbors are creating value for your property by paying for the sewer in their bill, and you can reap that value but not have paid anything for it.
Right.
Now, you may not reap it during your lifetime, or you may. It's hard to say, but it does create value on your property. And I guess the question is, is that fair for your neighbors to pay for you to get value? Because sewer availability does create value. It allows you to subdivide your property that you couldn't do before, and so you could possibly do that. Not saying that you would have an inclination to do that, but those that come after you might.
Right.
And that kind of creates a dilemma for us
Well, I
when
don't
you do that.
mind paying for the tap.
Well, I understand.
But having to dig line all the way up there and having to install it.
Right, and you
would
don't,
be
and you
impossible.
don't, that's right, and you don't, well, it'd be very expensive, for sure, it wouldn't be impossible, but,
Yeah.
and you don't have to do that.
Right.
But, I think what this ordinance does is it provides a mechanism that everyone has the availability, everyone's value of their property increases because there's no question, you ask anyone in the real estate business, sewer availability increases value.
Sure does.
So your house, your property and your house will be worth more because of that sewer line, whether you tapped into it or not. And so it makes it difficult for us to exclude people because of that very reason. Now, if there was no, if you were, if we didn't put a tap in and we said, for the rest of your life, forever, nobody could ever tap into that site, but we wouldn't do that anyway because ultimately somebody's going to come back and ask for a sewer tap. They just are. It makes it really difficult for us to exclude that. I don't know. I'm not speaking for the whole board either.
Well,
I'm just speaking
But
sort
you're
of how I
not,
feel.
but you're not required to tap on or to run that line all the way down to tap on. So that expense doesn't have to be yours unless you choose to do that.
This property right here.
When this first came up, there were actually several properties that were pretty far away. Miss Rosenthal is one of them also. She's not quite as far away, but I know that was one of the things that she had mentioned to staff, that she didn't want to be included in this because she had to go quite a little ways away. But it's able to be served, and so I think that was the decision of the board at the time, because they could be served they were included. And so that's, like I said, I know there were a handful besides Ms. Ford's property that were in that same situation.
Number 3 on that map. Looks as though that's about the same situation that Ms. Ford is.
Which property is hers? She is number 3.
No.
Oh, no. She's 4. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. 14. 14.
So what's the...
3's got a lot more road frontage.
Yeah.
But it's still that far away.
Not quite.
I would like to make just one comment.
Sure.
And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but one thing that occurs to me that might be a possible compromise to all this, the biggest risk, I think, to Margaret is the rule that says that if anything happens to your septic system, you will not allow them to repair it. You will force them at that time to tie on. And they have sufficient property, I would think, to effect a proper repair. They're not one of those properties that's on a postage stamp. So if we could consider, and I agree with you, maybe it probably in the long run is not appropriate to pull them out of the assessment district, but possibly to allow a waiver to allow them to repair their septic system if they have a problem. Because I think that you would find if they actually did that line, it would, I don't even know what it would cost. It's all rock all the way up.
So there would be another septic field available there?
Well, they've got 6 acres.
6 acres, yes. So you would have.
Yeah, and it's all on hilltops.
It all depends on the percolation.
And the county, and we don't really even make that. The county would have to. It's not our
But if you could allow
call.
them to repair.
It's the county's.
Can we put something in that says...
If it does part.
We could say if the county would allow it, that we could do that. We can't grant it, because we don't review, we're not that, and I don't know if I'd have any objection to that.
I don't think I would have an objection to that.
Would that be, and thanks for trying to think of something. Would that be an acceptable solution? Okay, well, we're going to vote on it tonight. Maybe we might make that amendment tonight at 7 o'clock. And thank you for coming forward, and you look lovely in your Christmas outfit.
Thank you.
You brighten our room up.
Thank you.
Would you want to, are you talking about doing that specifically for this case, or would you, because you just changed Title 18 not too long ago, and I think that was where it's stated.
I think we're just going to make a specific exception for this particular piece of property.
I would suggest that.
If there happened to be one more that is far away, but that had over 5 acres or something like that.
And you're going to get another one.
I know. I was going to say that.
I would hope that if something happened to my septic tank, that I would be able to repair it.
See, there you go.
700 feet down there.
This is a slippery slope.
But wait, let us say if it's over 5 acres and the county finds an acceptable field.
So how many property would that be, Eric?
Well,
one, you have to look 1, 2,
Monticello and
3,
Highgate and everything else.
4.
Well, no, because those are not 5 acre lots.
No, those are 5 acres.
What Ann said was anything, what we called it, if it's over 5 acres and there's an acceptable field.
We could say 6.47 acres.
Well, I think you would run into somebody saying that was arbitrary and capricious if you did that. So.
Well,
let's
Eric, you're not our attorney. We'll figure about that later.
Let's just say they paid for the sewer with an assessment, and it's over X number of acres, and it has a field acceptable to the
county. The county has to sign off on it, and they're tough these days.
There you go. If the county thinks it's any of the properties you would think if you have.
All right. We'll talk about that tonight. All right. Item number 4. Consideration of proposed ordinance 2010-77 to establish a special assessment for the sanitary sewer improvements in the Country Road Estates area. Establish a public hearing for January 11, 2011. Does anybody here from Country Road? Yeah, we haven't had any
This one's pretty straightforward. The amount less the 40% forgiveness is $66,269.07.
66,000 what?
$66,269.07.
That's the total for all.
That's what will be spread among the property owners.
Which is
8 property owners.
Okay, anything else? Merry Christmas, y'all.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right, you'll be back at 7. Go have something to eat for me, will you?
How do you find out how this works out as far as the hair?
You mean on the vote tonight?
Yeah.
Well, there's 3 votes, so, I mean, whatever happens tonight, we got 2 more opportunities to vote on.
2 votes total. Yeah, it's a
2 votes, I'm sorry. January 11th will be the final vote public hearing.
There's an update to the wording.
It will be, you can...
Reflected in the next.
In the minutes, and you will also can view it on our television station.
And you know that deal about the inspection was good for 5 years? Do we just give a letter to y'all so you can put it in our file?
I think that's the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll sign a certificate for you.
All right. Nothing like happy customers. Item number 5, consideration of the road impact fee. Is that where we are? Yeah. Offset agreement with Boyle at 1175 Meridian Joint Venture for Crothers Parkway at Cool Springs Boulevard intersection improvements.
One of your priority capital projects in the 2010-2014 capital investment program had been an additional right turn lane on Carruthers in the up to Cool Springs, and we have been approached by Boyle Joint Ventures, who's the developer of the Meridian Cool Springs East development, and they're preparing to move forward with an additional office building out there, approximately 190,000 square foot office building, and they basically looked at that and said it's going to generate impact fees, road impact fees, roughly equivalent to the cost of that project. And they approached us to say, what if we built that and did that in lieu of paying those impact fees? And so we looked at that and worked with them to develop a draft agreement which is before you tonight. And just to kind of address that a little more specifically, we're bringing that forward, recommending that, but it's important to realize at the end of the day, they will only get credit for the true cost, documented cost of that construction, of that additional right turn lane that is added there. So we have an engineer's estimate that's around $460,000. The estimated impact fees for the office building, and there's a couple other build-out elements that are on approved site plans. There's another element in this that's not in an approved site plan, but just those that are in approved site plans right now would be roughly equivalent to that. It's somewhere around $440,000. But at the end of the day, they're going to get credit for what it costs to build that. If it's less than that, they'll still owe the remainder. If it's more than that, we've got that limitation up there, but they will be responsible for that component. The other element to this is there's additional consideration. They've brought up a concern that would help this work better, may have some other benefits in terms of providing signalization in this same area. It happens to be the area that comes out of by Corporate Center Drive, and it's the exit for the conference center. And they've asked that also be looked at as an improvement. That's not in this agreement as it stands today, but I just want to give you a heads up that we may be looking at, is there an option to include that so that that could be a component of this, or that there may be some other partners that might participate in helping the signalization happen that could help this work better. But that's not before you right now, and we don't know if that will come to fruition or not, but we want to let you know that we'll look at that, and you may see something come forward on that. But traffic studies have been conducted that point that this being a benefit, improving the service level. There are obviously some additional development going on in that area with not only this building, but the new IRS building. We know some other tenants up there are in an expansion mode. So this is a positive from a development standpoint, a positive from a transportation improvement standpoint, and really is exactly what the road impact fee ordinance was intended to do, to provide this kind of credit when a developer is able to provide an improvement that we've targeted as a needed improvement as a community, to deliver on that, and with their ability to maybe tie into other site improvements, other work they're doing with their development, may provide a better value for everybody, the taxpayer and for the developer as well, to get this done potentially at a cost lower than what we might do if we bidded it directly and delivered it as a city-only project. So that's before you, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have. I don't know if representatives from Boyle are here or not.
Adam is and also, isn't that intersection one of our intersections where we have a whole lot of traffic wrecks at, right at that point?
More tickets than wrecks.
Okay.
And there's
a lot of illegal movements.
There's a lot of...
Okay.
There is a lot of congestion here. That one of the consistent complaints we've heard is that this is a real bottleneck at certain times, and as we see more development and more jobs are in that location, that's only going to get worse if we don't take some.
The opening of Carruthers and McEwen and everything further south, because you used to have a lot of people that turned right to go onto the interstate. They would maybe go down to 96, but they can go on down Carruthers.
And I will say that in a conversation that this Eric and I had in our work on economic development, that was a piece of the conversation. Yeah. That right-hand turn there is critically important, and it backs up. And because as you probably know, but so everybody explained, there's not a acceleration lane, and it doesn't go to the interstate. So you have to get out into the main lane, and then get over. And not a lot of people let them in, and so I drive that road most every day, and a lot of times it's very difficult to get in there without question.
I had some questions that I asked, although I do see that this would be a good project. But the question is, this would be for impact fees in Prospect. In other words, we would not be using any money that we already have to reimburse this. Is that right?
Correct.
Because there is something in our budget that states a $300,000 reimbursement for something, and the question was, my first question was, is this the type of thing that we would be getting? But we're talking about fees that we would get from here on out, even though I know they paid a lot of fees already.
This is really in lieu of paying those impact fees when they pull the building permit. They would do this work, and we'd have this agreement saying this work is going to be conducted in place of that. Now there'll be a reconciliation at some point that documents the true cost of delivering that improvement and compares it to what the impact fee obligation is. And so we sort of reconcile that out.
Do they do the work before the impact fees are payable?
Probably.
They would,
at least part of it.
Yeah, they would do that work as a part of
so what I'm asking, let's just say the impact fees were due July the 1st, when they pull a building permit, or whether they pull. Will they have the work completed before then?
No.
Will they have been started by then?
This agreement really provides for that that commitment.
Well, I'm just saying.
Well, that's a good question, though.
Get out ahead on their money before they get out ahead on the money that we've collected on the impact fees.
And I think you've seen
situations
both ways in the past on other types where the agreement has been made. So some of them that I can think of, I know West Haven did some turn lanes on 96. Sutherland did, the McEwen Drive construction. And I think all of those, McEwen, obviously, there's a lot of buildings that haven't been built yet, so those were out in front, whereas, West Haven probably already had several of, structures in place. So it can go either way.
So if they come in with a bill, Eric, of $460,000, they've got $440,000 in impact fee credits, we owe them 20?
No.
We'll never owe them anything.
We're not going to owe anything.
So they'll pay whatever it costs, and even if it's more than the impact fees, we don't have to reimburse them.
Correct.
But if it's less than the impact fees, we collect the difference.
Right.
Correct.
But I do think it's very important to say that it be done at the same time. It does not need to lag.
That's right. And I'm Adam Ballas.
Right.
Yeah, let Adam.
One of the comments I was going to make, counter to possibly West Haven or something like that, we would be pulling a commercial building permit versus a site grading permit for residential development, and so all of these improvements would happen concurrently. And Mr. Parker can correct me if I'm wrong, or Eric, but at the end, as you guys reconcile the bid documents and the cost of this project, if there is a deficiency in what we would have owed through the impact fees versus the cost that was outlaid for the construction, then we would pay that prior to the issuance of a CO, I would assume.
I was going to say, that might be the place to, and that needs to be in here. That needs to be in here then, that the improvement would be in before the CO is issued.
And that's fine. And what I was going to say as far as when the project would start is that we could pull that as part of the overall building permit and the site package that goes along with that we would do that work concurrently. The plans are currently approved from the city because it was done by you all, and so we would hope to just piggyback on that.
But we should put in then that the CO cannot be issued until the work is substantially is complete or substantial. Maybe it's complete.
The one thing that I may ask, and we hope to start this project next year, but if there's a way to tie this to the issuance of the CO for the office building versus a 7,000 square foot retail building that may only produce a very
primary
amount of fees.
I think that's fair.
I think
then that would be a great compromise on our end.
Yeah, that'd be great with that.
But that part should be in the contract then.
That's fine.
Anything else?
We'll work up a sentence on that with you.
Adam, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let me just really quickly, do we have some other things like this? Because in reality, even though they'll be paying for it, it really is money that the city would have a chance to put somewhere else if this is not, I'm not saying, I think this is probably the place, but what I'm saying is this is the same amount of money that we were talking about for a small project. So, in other words, if we're saying it's going to go here, then it cannot go, that means that some other thing that may have had a higher priority than this won't necessarily, be on the funding. Because as I say, it means $400,000, I'm just rounding off, $400,000 less that we would have available for a project that we might have rated higher.
I agree with that, and I think that's why they brought it here to say, is this where you want to use that money?
Well, and really for economic development, it probably is the best place.
I'll tell you, it's a discussion that we've run into.
But still, we need to be aware whenever we're doing this that it will mean that money is not available for something that we might rate higher than this.
Because someone may want to do something that just has no relevance at all, in our or have no rating at all, and we might not want to have them go. I think that's a good point. I really do think
and
that's
this
good.
area deserves to have this because, as you said, the economic development factor is really key.
And the existing conditions and that combination is pretty powerful in my opinion.
Okay, that's great. Let's move on to item number 6, consideration of proposed ordinance 2010-83, in order to establish a three-way stop sign controls at intersection of McEwen Drive and Wilson Pike.
This issue came up when we were looking at the Breezeway school development, but actually staff had submitted this to TDOT prior to that project coming up, seeking warrants for both an all-way stop and a signal here, and we have received those warrants back, approved by TDOT, and we would like board approval to go ahead and put a three-way stop in at this point. as an interim measure until the signal is ready to go and put in place. As you remember, that agreement provided that the schools would fund the traffic signal here. So
Do that right now.
Yes.
Is there any reason to do this kind of halfway? I mean, I understand when the signal comes up, I think it's absolutely appropriate, but there's a lot of difference between a signal and an all-way stop, in the sense that whenever the signal goes up, it's going to have cycles where the greater traffic volume will get a longer cycle, whereas if you're talking about an all-way stop, you're talking about everybody, having the same time frame in a way, and it says on here the peak hour critical delay will decrease from 375 seconds to approximately 150 seconds. But it does mean that Wilson Pike, which has at least twice as much traffic, is going to be getting at least that much added to their times, because really they don't have wait times there. They're going on through. And I mean, as I say, if a signal goes,
they need to get accustomed to stopping.
Well, but there's a difference though between, because as I say, once that cycle is set up, I don't know the official name for it, it will take into consideration that there's twice as much traffic on Wilson Pike as there is on McEwen, and it will give them, I don't want to say twice the length of the cycle as it is right now. So in that sense, I'd like for us to kind of give that a little bit more consideration. I don't know that it has to be done in the space of like 2 weeks or this month or anything like that. But I'm just saying it's going to really be a lot bigger burden on the people on Wilson Pike and it will be probably affect more vehicles by far than the people that are already stopped. I'd just like for us to look at it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been talking to a lot of the people in that area about this item that I've received in the last 4 or 5 days a lot of calls. So we've got some concerns. Why? First of all, I've got some things to say, and I have some questions to ask. But why are we doing this right now? Again, Eric, tell me why.
Well, basically, this was submitted. We're pursuing the warrants. The signal is not ready to go yet.
Right.
But the advice I got from our traffic engineering staff is that this would improve the traffic situation out there. That this is while not as good as the signal, is better than what is there now.
It's a baby step.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction. It's not the ultimate, but it provides us some improvement between now and when that signal goes up, which is some time between now and August.
I agree that it may provide some relief out there in some ways, but it causes a lot of other problems. And one of the things is that you've got that stop, go, and right now in McEwen, people can't get out. So that's our problem. And getting the stop sign will probably solve that problem. But if you think about this for a minute, when you're coming down McEwen and you get to Wilson Pike and Mead of Avalon's on your left, and you're looking at Wilson Pike in front of you, we have concrete trucks coming down there. We have buses coming down there now. And if you have a stop sign and you've got people stopped right there, we've got a problem getting those trucks. They can't take a right-hand turn. And so if you have people at the stop sign, they're not going to be able to come up on McEwen. The buses and the concrete trucks cannot take a right-hand turn because you've got cars piled up there at a stop sign. Now, right now, what they do is they wait because there's no stop sign on Wilson, and they wait till it clears, and then they take this wide turn because they're in that right-hand lane over there. If I'm sitting on Wilson, looking straight up Wilson, I'll be sitting here at a stop sign, and a truck comes up McEwen and turns right into me. And that's not going to work. So I don't know what we're going to do about that, putting the stop sign there. That causes a problem. And I went down there and met with some people the other day. We looked at it, and I don't know what we're going to do, because that's going to create a big problem with those trucks, and we've got buses that are currently there. So this solution brings another set of problems with it. And then when we get the schools operating in August, I don't know when
Well, you have the signal by the time the school is in
we'll have the
place.
signal. Then we're going to have that signal, when we do that signal, we're going to have to back those people up on Wilson, way far away from the signal, so those trucks and buses can still make that turn. Because we're only going to have the Nolensville kids coming in from Ravenwood now. And that's currently happening. But then we're going to have the McKay's Mill kids coming down McEwen to go to Breezeway. And then we're going to have those people over in that area going to Centennial. So we're getting a lot more traffic put on that road now because of the rezoning, not only because of Breezeway, but because of the rezoning. We've also got a power pole that's huge out there, and I'm a little concerned about that pole.
Of course, that all goes away when we build the bridge.
Right, and that does, but until we get to that point, I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't disagree, we might not look at why don't we just defer this tonight?
And then
It is a two-reading ordinance, so it will not be finalized tonight.
And then the other concern
These are some
I've
real
got,
problems. I hadn't even gone out there to look at it.
the other concern I've got is not only with the stop sign, but with, we've already got there now, we've already got a problem to deal with, and we're going to have another problem. I don't know how that's going to work when the signal gets there, but the people trying to get out of Mead of Avalon. So that needs to be looked at when we're talking about the signal, because we've already got problems, and I get calls about that. And they said, we're having worse problems getting out of our community. So, yeah.
Okay.
We've got to look at this.
Perfect, we'll defer. Item number 7.
Not saying that shouldn't go.
Consideration of the contract award to Stanzville Electric in the amount of $257,998 for the Mallory Station Road at General George Patton and Duke Drive signal insulation.
Yes.
Have any comments? We're going to let you make a motion tonight. Is that okay?
You know, we might want to talk about that one a little bit.
Item number 8, consideration resolution 2010-83, resolution to adopt the 2010 defined contribution 457 plan.
Really 8, 9, and 10.
8, 9, 10.
Are all the specific document amendments and establishment of the 401 program, a 401 program and 457 program that we will really define as the defined contribution program that the board has now provided as an option for our employees that are hired after February 15th, 2010. And then the item 10 is an amendment to the existing pension program that provides for how the folks that may opt for a defined benefit or traditional pension program, how their participation is how that's regulated, how that's handled going forward for folks that choose that. So this really puts in place the direction the board has given us through this year and the work that we've done on amending our pension program. We've provided a defined contribution option for employees. We've defined a modified defined benefit program for our employees, all of which we think is manageable from a cost standpoint, but still very competitive in the labor market and a good, reasonable benefit to provide our employees to. So this really puts all the specifics in place. We're glad to answer any questions you have. A lot of effort by our team from Russ and Shirley and Candace and Shauna and working on this, and this is just puts that all in place. So we're glad to answer any
and
questions.
it was so needed.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I didn't try to read it again, but we've had a lot of meetings on it, and as long as it's actuarially sound, I think that it was absolutely needed.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all the people who did.
Okay, yeah, really.
Yes, we are.
Of course, you know, let's see, it effective after people we hired when?
We have about 12 people that are in the February 15th. And
so we're only 11 months behind trying to get this approved.
But
So,
still.
item number 12, consideration resolution 2010-90, resolution to implement the fiscal year 2011 cost of living pay for employees who have reached the maximum of their pay grade.
Real quick, and item 11 was before this. That's a deferral.
Okay.
That's a specific grant. We didn't give you that.
Yes.
There's a lot of the documents you have, the case can be made, you've already provided appropriate authority to myself and my designees, but our trustee would like us to do a specific a grant of authority for specific people on staff that have certain signature authority. We'll come back to you on that in January, but we were hoping we would get that done. We just didn't for this meeting. So defer 11.
Okay.
That's what that'll reflect. Item 12 is a unique circumstance that we run into. We're in the process of implementing the 2% general wage increase that the board included as part of our budget, and that was to take place, at around the January 1 time frame. We've made that sync up with our pay period, so that's actually happening slightly before January 1. But we've got approximately 34 employees that fall into a category where they either already are at, or once the 2% is applied, they will reach the maximum of their pay grade. And what our HR manual and policies provide for is that those folks, you can't exceed your pay grade, but we can provide you with an additional supplement that gives you that additional dollars above that, so that we're still providing the 2%, but it's not included in your base, because your base salary can't exceed the pay grade. And that's what this provides for, and we would work to provide that to those 34 employees over the next, we're going to look at what's the best administrative way to do it in terms of the timing of how we space out that payment of that supplement, but would work to provide that to those employees in that category.
It's a one-time.
This would be a one-time. Their base salary, there's some folks that will reach the maximum, and that would be applied to their base. But once you're at that maximum, any amount above that maximum is seen as a one-time payment, and your base salary returns to that maximum level when we look at and establish the budget again for the next fiscal year.
That seems.
Michael?
Does this cause any problem with grade compaction? And
it would have to be timed.
I'm not that familiar with our system, but is there anything in there that says that a person that would manage a lower pay grade has to make X amount % more than anybody that they work for?
No, we don't really have that. What we try to look very closely at is the pay grades and the alignment and the consistency of those grades with the actual responsibilities for the positions. What we will likely do here in the next year or so is do a more comprehensive study of where our pay grades are at. That hasn't happened in the last 2 or 3 years, in part because we haven't been in a position to make any kind of adjustments to salaries, and the market has been changed. So we need to look at those changes, but also look at what's relevant there. But we don't have anything like that would put us in a position where we're conflicting ourselves with where people are in pay grade.
Or cause a domino effect where it kind of...
It really shouldn't. I'll let Candace address it then, too.
And most of these employees that are at the maximum of their pay grade, they've been here since the 80s. I mean, they've got 20 years of service or 22 years of service. Whereas, a lot of employees don't have that many years of service.
But it keeps us consistent with our pay system as we have it now and the pay grades that are established.
But is this going to be a one-time?
Yes,
payment?
It would be for this group.
Okay. Item number 13. Thank you, Ken. Consideration of finding of default on contract 2010-18 for the sale of structure at 1009 Hillsborough Road.
Earlier this year, we had approved a contract for the purchase of this residence that the city had purchased as part of the Mac Hatcher extension project. Basically, that set out a time frame for the successful bidder to remove the structure from this piece of land. That time frame is well past. We've made repeated efforts to try to contact the contractor in this situation. It's well past that deadline, and we really want to come to you tonight and look at our options to move forward. Essentially, they're in default of this contract, and we'd like to move forward with that, but wanted to inform the board, since it was your action to begin with in terms of awarding this, and would expect that we ultimately would put this in with the other properties we done a full purchase of in the Rebel Meadows neighborhood and include this in a larger scale demolition contract, and so that we can go ahead and move forward and get these elements going. Brian Wilcox from our purchasing area has worked closely to try to work through this issue, has even had some additional discussions now that this got a little more attention. We actually did get some contact with someone associated with this company, so we can fill you in on that a little bit, but I think there's pretty much agreement among all parties that this is in default of what was agreed to back when this was awarded earlier this year.
Any questions?
And there may be some economy of scale to do all of that
with the other 10 properties that are full
giant bulldozer. It was so much fun. Michael?
Was this the only bidder for this?
This was the only bidder that wanted to take the property. I think we had another bidder that was a demolition.
Yes.
Is that right? That we would have paid for. This was a relatively small purchase price, I think $575, and then they would be responsible for the costs associated with moving the structure. So, but they were the only bidder that proposed that approach.
Michael and I will lend you our bulldozer.
Great. Okay.
Did we receive any money?
Yeah, we got a deposit. What was the deposit? Oh, so we got the full. So we just declare it default.
Yeah, do you want to declare it default? And if you do you want to keep the money or not? And that's you.
Keep it.
Well, you guys have to tell us that because you have to exercise your rights, and we just need you to tell us that.
He default. We keep the money.
Yes,
How much?
More than default.
$575.
$575. Yes.
We can take every penny.
575.00.
Correct.
No, these people could have moved it first, right?
That's what they contracted to do.
Yeah.
This was awarded in February. It provided for 180-day
We gave them
implementation of that. So that was up in August. We've given them about 4 months more than that.
They gave us money. They purchased the house.
Oh, the people that,
They purchased the structure.
oh, wasn't the original owners.
No,
What did they pay for the structure?
Oh, well, that's.
$575 is what they paid us, and then they're responsible for the cost to move it.
But they never came to.
That's why they got it
So-
cheaply.
So what did they send us? Have we been in communication with them?
Very little for a long period of time.
What did this property?
Go ahead. Brian's had some discussions more recently.
I think they've tried to put together the financing necessary to move the house, and the financial market has shifted underneath their feet, and they can't make it work. And they're very sorry, and they're anxious to do what's right, and they want to treat the city correctly, and they want to just back out of this
Oh,
if that's
okay.
agreeable
All right,
with the city.
I want to know where they stood.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're looking for direction?
Tonight, yeah.
Tonight.
Tonight,
Just to find them
in the meeting.
And our recommendation is, you find that it's in default,
And
you
keep the
the payment that was made, and we move forward with bidding this out with another group of properties in the same area for demolition.
But until you find them in default, the house is still there.
Yeah, you're reclaiming ownership, essentially.
Yeah, and they sort of wanted to fall on it, so.
Okay, item number 14, consideration of bid award to Happy Tree, Inc. of Franklin, Tennessee, in the amount of $19,956 for tree supply, planting, and related contract services for the Parks Department, up to, let's see, procurement solicitation number 2011-009, up to $30,000, authorized by the Tree Commission to be transferred from the Tree Bank. Any questions, comments, concerns? Right. Item number 15, consideration of the bid award to Golden Circle Ford of Jackson, Tennessee, in the amount of $44,264 for one landscape truck with dump body for the Stormwater Division of the Streets Department. Budgeted $40,000, and it's $44,264. Any questions on that? All right, moving along. Item number 16. Consideration of Resolution 2010-86, a resolution to extend the temporary assignments for Housing Development Coordinator Clay Matthews, Planning Associate Kathleen Salcida, and Permit Tech Pat Springer through June 30th, 2011. This is just Well, because you do 6 months.
Basically, I have administrative authority to do a temporary assignment for 6 months. If it exceeds that, I need to have board approval, and we'd like to take this through the rest of the fiscal year. One of the things we've had to do to make budgets work is be creative and moving people around and do different things, and this is part of that. And also, we did assign Steve Sims to their software project in our utility building area, so that created some need to fill some positions here. So this all fits in and need your approval to take it further.
All right, item number 17, consideration of new liquor license, retailer certificate for Mallory Lane Wine and Spirits at 37 Mallory Lane. Any questions on that one? Item number 18, consideration of resolution 2010-85, resolution authorizing expenditure for drainage culvert rehabilitation on Sugar Tree Lane in the amount of $75,000. Amount to be funded through the Stormwater Reserve Fund. Item number 19, consideration of proposed ordinance, an ordinance to amend various chapters and sections of the City of Franklin zoning ordinance to clarify requirements and correct minor textual areas. You can sit down, Vernon. Item number 20, consideration of proposed ordinance 2010-81, an ordinance amending the City of Franklin Municipal Code, amending Title 22, comprehensive fees and penalties for the purposes of deleting certain fees in Title 16, streets and sidewalks, etc. ordinance. Item number 21, consideration of proposed ordinance 2000. I'm sorry, you didn't act quick enough.
Questions on 19?
Yes, sir. 19?
Yes.
Vernon, come on up here. All right. You stay, Vernon. Man, you're 2 pieces behind.
That's a long way down. It's only 5 after 6.
It takes a long time for my voice to travel that far.
Just because we have the time doesn't mean you have to fill it up.
That's exactly right.
Questions now on these changes for the heights and essentially it lets us, you can go to 6 stories.
Yes.
In RX, MN, ML, and MX, and that's the change.
But it's in these districts, too.
It's in the districts, and the heights actually are, that's the densities that you're talking about. The heights are actually 4 stories at the bottom.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. So we've increased that.
Well, we haven't increased it. We're clarifying it. It came through the 2008 zoning amendment to the original zoning code, but we're now clarifying those items with an additional note or notes.
And that's really what it is on almost all of them.
They're all clarifications or further explanations of what was already in the 2008 zoning ordinance.
Okay. I think I also noticed in here that it said, and also depending on what was recommended in the character area?
Yes.
As far as heights?
Yes.
So the character area would...
The land use plan, the character area, and the zoning ordinance from 2008 control what the heights are. And primarily everything is controlled by the 2008 zoning ordinance. These are clarifications to the 2008 zoning ordinance by adding additional notes.
Okay. And the MCO, all those are these MECO and GCO, are all those?
Those are all overlays.
Overlays near...
primarily near the interstate.
Near the interstate, okay.
Yes.
So this also allows for a PUD.
This allows for PUDs in all areas, and PUDs in certain areas are the controlling factor, primarily in the overlay zones.
Okay. Is there any language that would bring into consideration next to other residential areas for adjacent property?
that would be something that we would look at as an amendment to our current zoning ordinances. These are really clarifications, changing of errors, or situations where we have conflicting regulations in different sections. If we wanted to look at difference in heights near other residential areas, we'd have to come back and amend the zoning ordinance to allow for that.
Okay.
All right. 19, 20, 21, which I just read. 22, consideration proposed ordinance, an ordinance amending the City of Franklin Municipal Code, amending comprehensive fees and penalties, Chapter 18, water and sewers, for the purpose of updating water user rates. Any questions on that?
That's what we've already done,
Yeah.
right?
Item number 23 is the continuation of discussion on road impact fees. After our meeting, I guess, the other one.
Yeah, we've had a work session publicly, had a number of individuals from the community and other stakeholders there to give us input on road impact fees, and wanted to get a little guidance on how you'd like us to proceed on any adjustments to that, to those impact fees, and maybe give you a little bit of the thoughts of staff after reflecting on it a little bit. And I'll try to hit a couple of the issues and also be open to whatever the board wants to chime in on. One of the issues we heard about was the issue of including collectors, and also if our cost basis for those collectors was a good one. And I guess as we've reviewed it more, we would suggest that we pull the collector issue off the table at this point, with one potential exception. And I'm not sure if I'll use the terminology right here, Eric, but what we're thinking of is, would it make sense to look at a classification of collectors that is sort of a major commercial collector? An example, a collector that maybe connects two arterials that's right in a commercial area that has a lot of traffic, et cetera, and that might be worthy of considering that very narrow component. And we're thinking of example like Jordan Road is an example of that sort of connects some arterials, has a lot of commercial development on it. Would that make sense to incorporate that so that you can capture costs related to that and look at that in your calculation? We don't know where we'll end up on that, but we'd like to maybe limit it to that and look at that very narrow group instead of all collectors, but maybe look at that component and feel that we may be able to define that and look at that for you a little more.
And make some specific designations for us to look and see what you're talking about.
Yeah, just narrow that to
might be a
that
good
specific
idea.
group, because that's the one, when we think about it, that is probably the area that we would really want to still think about, and that taking it any broader really is probably not the right move at this point. And so that's one component. If you're comfortable, we'd like to basically take that issue off the table with the exception of that very narrow group definition. The other element that came up was the idea of, when you look at residential contributions, of tiering that by the size of the home. There had been at least that issue brought up. And I guess I wanted to take a little different approach to that, or ask the board to think about it a little bit differently. If the purpose of that is to look at affordable housing issues, I would suggest you don't tier your roadway impact fees because you want to try to help make housing more affordable or contribute in some way. I think that's an entirely different policy discussion, and you probably need to look at, if you decide to do that, if you're going to provide some sort of reduction factor, et cetera, then that needs to probably be something we fund, that you make an allocation towards funding in your general fund so that we keep the impact fund whole, but they also are making a direct connection to say, okay, we want to provide this level of reduction for properties or homes that meet a certain affordability factor, and we're willing to support that with some basically transfer of funds to do that. Because as we looked at it, I didn't think we could really justify saying just because a house is larger does not necessarily mean it will have more trips and use roadways more. They're just, we couldn't see a justification in that relationship, because you can see a home that may be 1,800 square feet that has 5 cars in it, and a house that is 3,000 square feet that has 1 or 2. I mean, that can easily happen. So I think, and we're trying to read into what the board's intent might be if you wanted to look at that issue. If you think there's truly a relationship, we can ask the consultant to look at that and try to give us some more clarity on that. But if your interest is more at getting at affordable housing, our advice would be to look at that more as a different policy discussion, and not mix that into what's the right way to allocate costs on road impact fees.
Yeah. I appreciate that component, is that keeping it whole, keeping the whole process whole, and then looking at some type of other steps to assist with affordability.
And I think that's a policy question, but it's also, that approach is also more sound from a governmental accounting and standpoint as well, that we keep that fund whole, that we're not just providing discounts within that fund without any replacement or any other transfer provided to reimburse that.
Is there a way that we could take recent projects, just as a scenario, and calculate both ways, with collectors and without collectors, to see what the outcome would be? Because we're really going to vote on something and we don't really know what the financial outcome.
Well, they did use costs for
living without.
They use costs. One of the deficiencies was that we didn't have a lot. The city doesn't build a lot of collectors. Mm-hmm. We just don't. They typically are built by the developer.
That's right.
And so we don't have a great cost basis to turn to. We sort of extrapolated it off of some other projects, and I guess we could work on that and we could develop that. But our sense was that, and the board needs to tell us what you think on this, but that was creating such a significant cost impact in that impact fee structure. Was that even something you wanted to go down that road? And so we thought about it and said, where's the area that we're most concerned about, that really this might make the most sense? And that was this commercial collector, major commercial collector category. And we'd like to look at that component and see what that does if we incorporate that. That's a much smaller universe than our major collector universe. So we don't know where that'll come out, but we'd like to look at those numbers. We can look at all collectors if you want and try to come up with some extrapolation on costs. We just don't have much direct cost experience because we don't build many of them.
No, I'm just worried that this certainly needs to be to the advantage of the city. We're always behind the 8 ball and having enough money to do road projects that have been needed for years. So we don't need to make a choice that the city has less money to do that with. And without us having some scenario to see how either one of these applications would be, I don't think we've got enough information to really make a good financial decision.
Well, the initial study provided a collector scenario. Now, the question came up, is that a good cost basis to provide for your collectors? And so, we could spend more time trying to develop a better cost basis on collectors if you'd like us to.
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm saying, if we applied one of these or the other, with collectors or without, and we take a recent project, and we say, okay, if you apply it this way, the city would wind up having X dollars to our advantage, or with it the other way, which one would give us, out of that individual project, the better? And is that significant, or is there enough difference in different projects that's not going to be?
Well, I think there's one other part to this that we need to say, but you might go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the existing impact fee study gives us the ability to do that. We could run a scenario with that. Now, there might be questions if that's a good cost basis on the collector
That's right,
number.
because that one we were looking at. is
But it at least gives you a sense of that, and that was a significant cost increase, on the cost, on the kind of per unit cost level. But we could run you something like that. We're trying to respond to the questioning that we got. Is that a good assumption about what collectors really cost you? And that's a harder one for us to really drive down. I mean, we could make some base assumptions, but we weren't sure if that's even something the board wants to go down that road.
Well, here's the other part to it, though. If the developer builds that street and they have to pay on that, then the city is going to have to reimburse them for the street that they built. And I think that was kind of the counterexample that the engineer was talking about. There have been some collectors back whenever they did charge for collectors but then they funded the building of them. It turned out that the city probably had less money that made available because the developer had built the collector and they got reimbursed for it. So that's the other part of it, I think. But we can give you one probably really good example.
What would be? I mean, we really need to use some kind of mixed-use development because you've got a mixture of residential and commercial. If we're going to do maybe we should just invent a project.
And we could run a scenario
and just say it's got 500 homes and
that way we give us some idea of outcome.
100,000 feet of office space, and what does that look like running those scenarios?
Right.
I just really don't you'd have to figure out. I'm sorry, but you'd have to know whether there was a collector and not a collector in that project, and I don't know. I mean, you could find as many scenarios as you have hairs on your face, which is a bunch.
I still don't understand why you can't just do the assessment according to the square footage of the house.
Because it's based on trips.
But why do you have to base it on trips? That's what we're just saying. You don't know how many trips.
That's how the whole thing is.
To be able to legally and to be able to defend it if somebody told us on it. We use published information that is used throughout the country.
About trip generation.
Every item is analyzed by trip generation. Every single classification, nursing home, shopping center, hotel, office, it's analyzed by national standards of trip generation traffic.
But we just got through saying we don't know how many trips are going to be generated from certain square footage of houses.
It's an average.
It's an average. Like I said, it's a published number that's, and I think
we use an overall average on residential is what we do right now.
Somebody had asked if there was a separation, and I looked through the ITE book that we've got that shows the trip generations. I could not find anything. It was just single family residential. It did not split it up 3,000 and above or below or anything like that. It was just for residential. So, I mean, there may be some information out there, but what we use, which is a national standard from ITE, it's not split up that way. And I don't know what else is out there that would be possibly provide that information.
Do you want to? Can you try to do some kind of?
We could run a scenario based on what's already in here. I guess the question is, do you want us to do more work to try to refine a collector assumption number or not?
What is that? I'm trying to get the goal here, other than
exactly what Ann
maybe
said.
tweaking the number that we already
come out worse because we would include collectors.
Then you'd have to figure out how many collectors run a certain project. So one project you may come out ahead, one project you may come out behind, and based upon the old figure, liars figure and figures lie. We could come up with just about whatever you wanted, I would imagine. Because I don't know how you, unless you just, now I'll retract, unless you just took a specific project.
Right.
That's what I was wondering, something that's already.
Which one do you want to pick? I mean,
well, maybe
Pick a little one like, West Haven, figure that one.
Well, and it does, I mean, there are a lot of projects, I mean, some projects only needed to put in a turn lane. Some of them had to build 1,000 feet of roads. You take McKay's Mill that had to build however many, miles of off-site streets. I mean, every example, as the mayor said, you can come up with any scenario you want.
And the other thing is, some of those are used a great deal, but some others are really not, and they're designated collectors because of, where they go and but in reality, they have very little traffic on them, very little traffic on them. Where some of them have a lot.
I think we're getting bogged down.
But I don't mind though looking. I was going to say.
I'm just trying to think of a project
I don't want to see
that
staff
I'm thinking
wasting
very
time on a
far.
scenario.
Well,
I just don't think we should do
one
the scenario.
that's already built is Sullivan Farms, and there's a
It doesn't
collector
have
in
any
that.
commercial in it.
That's what I mean. But that's why I kind of like the idea of looking at maybe a new designation as major, what'd you say, major commercial connector. That might be worth looking at.
And that's the staff recommendation.
The other,
right now.
if it's just residential, I don't think it would, I don't want to say pay for itself. You might have to give them more to build it than it would generate there. Commercial, I don't know.
Why don't we kind of discuss that?
Let's see if we can come up with a scenario.
But otherwise, I would probably be
that's
against.
doable.
I would probably be against putting collectors in.
We have to do McEwen, you'd have to do the whole McEwen project, not just the town center project.
Well, I'm talking from Mallory down to.
Let us look at that and see. There was one other issue that came up in the discussion that I don't want to leave out, is some discussion about kind of zoning the impact fees generated in an area, that you would keep those in that area, generated by that area, you keep in that general area. And I think that, as we talked about it at staff level and as we looked at it, I really feel that is a companion to the collector discussion. I think if you start bringing the broad collector category in, then you may want to look at some component of zoning those fees. But to the extent you're still using arterials are to the benefit of the entire system, and I think it makes sense to not have that zoning breakout. Again, this sort of hinges on, if you really want to go down the path on collectors, then maybe we do want to look at that. And I guess that's sort of a fork in the road here, is if we want to look at with the exception of the major commercial collector, small category, if we look at the larger group of major collectors here, that may cause us to look at a calculation of those costs, that cost basis, and do you want to look at the idea of zoning or keeping some portion of those impact fees generated in a broader geographical category. So that was the other issue that came up. We were looking at direction from the board on.
Did we used to do that?
For a brief period, I understand.
A long time ago.
But it wasn't at the beginning, as I remember it, but there was a time.
I think that did that work when we were doing some collector
No,
components?
well, this is prior to me, but I believe what David had mentioned was
David's not here.
When it was looked at,
He remembers everything.
Yeah, when it was looked at, it was it still seemed like there were only projects in one area that that kind of benefited or kind of were included, and some of the other areas weren't, because a lot of the development was in Cool Springs at that time or whatever. And,
I think it's too restrictive. Why would we restrict ourselves?
And I think that's
why would we do that?
Yeah, and I think
why would we do that? I mean, why not give us complete flexibility on that? Yeah, Ken?
I think my comment is, after listening and thinking about this, is that we don't want to create an accounting nightmare for the city. Let's keep it as concise and compact as we can without complicating the city and having to hire more people and more computer programs and more software developers to keep up with it.
Good company.
The only downside to it
You've got a
is,
suitcase, you don't have to look at it, do you?
very good.
When my wife goes on trips, she takes empty suitcases so she can fill them.
You did not have to make that comment.
On live TV.
She just did that 2 weeks ago.
The fourth and final issue that's just here that I would just comment on, we'd like to continue to keep the right-of-way component in as at least an option to discuss, because that is more and more a driving component of costs in doing the projects. So not presupposing where you'll end up on that issue, since staff is recommending, for the most part, pulling the major collector issue off the table, we'd still like to keep the right-of-way in for at least consideration at this point.
Well, yeah, maybe consideration, but I mean, you know, one of the other one of the recurring comments has been that by the time you add in these extra things, then you're talking about really upping the fees a great deal. And that would be probably my major concern on the right-of-way. And again, it turns out that we'll be reimbursing people, you know, too. So.
Well, I think it's good to look at it.
I do too. I do too.
Not exclude it at this moment.
That's right. I would say that.
Yeah, there's a balancing act with all of this in terms of incorporating the appropriate costs without creating too much of a cost burden.
No. Anything else? All right, now we've got executive session. You want to go to that right at the moment?
Yeah.
We can
do that? Oh.
Is Bill coming? Okay.
All right, well, then we'll break, but we'll have to reconvene to call executive session before we go to our regular board meeting.
Could we go ahead and convene it now, and when Bill's here, start it? I mean...
The only negative is when you start a meeting or something.
You don't for executive session.
When he comes, we'll come. We'll get
yada yada yada.
We'll just. I can get more 5 votes to come to executive session while we're eating chicken. Yada yada yada. Blah blah blah.